Hello, my name is Grant Root, and I'm going to be talking about a subject today that we all know pretty well, or not as well as we might have thought that we did. It's the music industry. So I'm going to start out with one question. How do you think that most music artists make the majority of their income? If you think it's through record sales, then you're mistaken. So raise your hand if you have parents that have a record collection. Now, how many of you have a record collection or a music collection of your own? Now, how many of you have actually kept up on collecting all of today's most modern music that you'll hear on the radio or that your friends share, or instead do you go somewhere else for that? The truth is, fewer people every day continue the ritual of collecting music. Despite countless opportunities for people to take advantage of all of these different various online resources, it's just too much work for most people to keep up on it because there's so much nowadays. Now in this presentation, I'm going to illustrate the most important change that the music industry must endure in the years to come in order to meet net demand and peak profit. It's the free release of music. So, with that said, the organization of this PowerPoint is going to go as such. We're going to talk about the old-fashioned music business, so the 1950s, 60s, all the way down to 2000. Then what happened when that met the internet? The birth of the internet is a pretty big event. Now, what comes after? What to expect from that? So, let's go. So, we started in the 1950s really with recording tapes. Then it was vinyls. And at this time, we really had few amount of record distributors and companies. However, we also only had a few amount of artists. So with that said, we only had a really few amount of people to pick from. So as a result, people would only buy these albums because there was very little selection. So also because of this, they didn't have the technology to keep up with what we're doing lately, which I will get into. But most important point is they did not have the essential tools that we have today to really revolutionize music again, like we did in the 1960s. Now here we have a chart illustrating this point. You can see starting in 1973 it was on the rise, and now in 2009, just a few years ago in 2009, we had way less sales than we ever even did in 1982, and we're going to get into some of the reasons why that happened. The internet. Now, before the internet even came along, we were already starting to burn CDs and use other forms of technology to pass on music without having to purchase a whole project. After that, we experienced an even bigger phenomenon, sensation if you will, about downloading free mixtapes or songs on sites such as YouTube. Because there's other extensions of YouTube, as many of us younger people know, called YouTubeMP3.org. And with this, all you got to do is copy the URL and download it, and it's actually free. There's been plenty of court cases, but it's completely legal. So with that said, it can be really difficult to keep up these sales. And in addition to this, you have pirating, you have torrenting, which is the illegal sharing of media files and full project albums over different websites. Now, aside from these two things, you have something called music streaming, which most people are really familiar with. This is not a form of collection, but instead is sort of like renting, if you will. So some sites are really popular for most people are Pandora, Spotify, Apple Music, and as well as SoundCloud. SoundCloud is also one of those that you can just stream music on there, but many of the newer artists or less popular artists, they'll allow you to download their music for free on there. So, because of all this, we have so many countless self-promoting, self-sufficient artists, whereas we never had anything comparable to that. back before the internet even came close to coming along. So because we have all these seemingly endless opportunities and such a vast selection of what we want, it's hard to say that we're going to buy some project that we have to pay $10 for when we could just get somebody else that is releasing it for free. It is a different artist most of the time, but you can also, even if you want to, you'll be able to find those means to obtain that album if you really want to own it, or you can always use a music sharing site such as Spotify or any of the others that I mentioned previously. Now, where's it going? That's pretty big. We have the opportunity now to make music as big as it could ever be, bigger than it ever has been before, because if you release something online and it is good and it is free, people will talk about it, people will give it to their friends, people will download it themselves, and you can access this all by yourself, all for free now. Now, because there's a lack of demand for buying music and such an endless supply of what you can have, there's a lack of quality and trust and consistency in artists, which people have a problem with. That's why they never really want to buy anything anymore. That's why this whole demand supply thing has really kind of gone out of whack, and the whole previous popular model of purchasing music has kind of been outdated. Now, what I propose, what I think is the best alternative and what music will eventually go into, is free music. I think that it would be most advisable for, say, a president or CEO of a record company to take their more newer artists that have less of a fan base, and even though, despite having those initial fees of recording, they can release that project for free, and they will gain miles more of momentum and gaining a potential fan base. Whereas if they just release it and try to get as much money as they can to pay back for that, it's going to be really difficult, because people aren't going to know. They're not going to, if they don't want to pay even $1.29 for a pop song that they know they like, why would they spend $9 on 10 songs that they've never heard before by an artist that they don't even know if they're good or not, and they can trust them? They don't know if they're artistically consistent. So if this is done in the most efficient way, and it will eventually, inevitably, lead to higher ticket sales, which is more profitable anyways, because when an artist gets money for a song that they recorded, such as on Apple, out of like $1 of one of the songs, they would only get 3 to 5 cents. Whereas if they're playing in a venue and a ticket sale is selling for $80, they might even get, who knows, up to $40 of each individual ticket. That's a lot of money to go around. So it could be said that it is a very positive potential payoff to initially release the first couple projects, if not the first few projects of a new artist, in hopes of making it up by having higher record sales, or ticket sales, and playing in bigger venues with a bigger audience, because they've allowed for people to hear their music rather than confining it to whether or not they wanted to pay for it. So, this brings us around to my conclusion. We need dramatic action, not by a fan base, but by the record labels, by the independent artists. They need to have the courage to, even though they're investing their money in something that is very costly and could be a very big risk, whether or not it's successful or not, they have to make that jump. They have to take the risk in releasing their project for free, because if they do, they really could see a tremendous payoff, and eventually, when people have that respect for an artist that originally released all their stuff for free, and they said, I know this is legitimate and it's quality product. And even on the second project or the third project, I could have you pay for it, but I won't, and I'm going to continue to release these first initial projects so that when I have, instead of my mixtapes or EPs, if you will, your debut album. And there is when you make the money. That is when you promote it. That is when you say, this is the highest of highest quality, and I have put my blood, sweat, and tears and everything into this, and this is my first project. Many other artists have done this lately in the between 2010 and 2015, and has been very successful, and they've seen way higher record sales rather than if they had just done so by making people try to pay for their first mixtapes, because it wouldn't have been successful and it would have just slowed down their momentum to maybe not even get to where they are now. So we need a restoration of the respect that this industry once held. Nowadays, people are listening to songs that they don't even know what the artist is, because they're just letting Pandora cycle through, and all they know is a few words on the chorus, if not the whole chorus, but they don't even know the artist name nor the album title, which is pretty sad in my opinion, and I hope you agree with me. So, free music.